Welcome to another deep dive. You guys have sent in a bunch of stuff about this case in Mississippi, about Jennifer and Brandon Sheffield, a couple going through a divorce. And it ended tragically just a few days after Christmas.
Right.
So we're going to try to piece together everything that we know.
Okay.
And we're going to start with Jennifer's TikTok account because she was very open online about the things that were going on in her life.
Yeah, it gives us a glimpse into, her desire for a fresh start, the challenges she was facing with single parenting, and even, her pursuit of a healthcare career.
Yeah, and in one video, she talks about Brandon being supportive through the separation.
Right.
They were trying to make the divorce as amicable as possible.
It seemed that way, yeah.
But then, a few weeks before everything happened, she posts another video where her tone is totally different.
Right.
And she talks about feeling God's presence, but she also expresses this fear, and it's almost paranoia. She claims that the devil is after her. Let's listen to that clip. That is chilling. Knowing what happened just weeks after she posted that.
It is.
Do you think that video could be a sign of something darker, beneath the surface?
It's definitely a red flag. I mean, while we can't diagnose anyone, solely based on social media posts.
Of course.
Her words suggest a heightened state of anxiety or maybe even fear for her safety.
And this was during the holiday season.
Right.
Which, a lot of families find that time really emotionally charged already.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're going through something like a divorce.
For sure.
She even posted about being overwhelmed with finances, being a single parent.
Absolutely. The holidays can really amplify those existing stressors like, the financial burdens, the pressure to create a perfect Christmas for your kids.
Yeah.
In some cases, that pressure cooker environment can tragically lead to these really impulsive actions.
And that's what happened here just 3 days after Christmas on December 28th, 2023. Jennifer and Brandon were found dead in their Mississippi home from gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
And their daughter was there during the incident.
It's just awful. The trauma that this child has endured is unimaginable.
So where does the investigation go from here?
Well, in suspected murder-suicide cases, investigators follow a very specific protocol. They're going to meticulously examine that crime scene, analyze those gunshot wounds, and, of course, search for a suicide note.
Would they also look at their digital footprint?
Oh, absolutely.
Her TikTok videos, texts, emails, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Any digital evidence could be really crucial in understanding the dynamics of the relationship.
Right.
And in this case, Jennifer's TikToks, those might provide valuable insight into her state of mind, in the time leading up to the tragedy.
Especially considering how she portrayed Brandon initially.
Exactly.
She talked about how supportive he was, which contrasts so sharply with the outcome.
Investigators are going to want to piece together a timeline, analyzing any shifts in her online behavior.
Right.
Any hints of potential conflict or abuse that might have been hidden from view.
This brings us to the big question of motive.
Yeah.
Is it possible that Brandon just snapped? Or were there, deeper underlying issues at play?
Well, it's impossible to know for sure without a thorough investigation, but it's important to remember that, acts of violence like this, they rarely occur without warning signs.
Could Jennifer's TikToks, specifically the one where she expresses fear, be considered as evidence of a potential threat?
Potentially, investigators will want to determine if this video combined with other evidence points to a pattern of controlling behavior or a history of domestic violence.
We're really lucky to have Elizabeth Parker with us today.
Yeah.
She's a crime victims' rights attorney, and she's going to help us shed some light on the legal aspects of this case.
Right.
So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's important to have these conversations, however difficult they may be.
In a case like this where you have a minor child who witnessed, this horrific tragedy, what are the immediate legal steps that are taken to make sure that child is safe?
The court will immediately step in to determine custody arrangements. And in Mississippi, the Department of Child Protection Services would likely be involved.
Okay.
To ensure that child's safety and to connect them with the necessary support services.
And are there specific legal protections in place for children in these situations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mississippi has a crime victims compensation program that can help cover expenses like counseling and other support services for children who have experienced a crime.
That's good to know. And Jennifer's aunt actually set up a GoFundMe page to support her 2 daughters.
Oh, wow.
And she wrote, "There's no handbook on how to navigate such a tragedy."
Right.
Which, a lot of people feel that way when something unexpected like this happens.
Yeah, it's a very powerful statement. and it highlights the importance of community support during times of crisis.
Right.
This GoFundMe page offers a tangible way for people to help these children as they navigate this unimaginable situation.
We'll include a link to that GoFundMe in the show notes for anyone who wants to help.
Right.
But going back to the investigation, what are the key challenges in piecing together, what happened?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that we don't have a surviving suspect to interview.
Right.
So investigators will have to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, witness statements, digital footprints, and of course, any physical evidence found at the crime scene.
And as you said before, Jennifer's TikToks, while they do give us this unique window into her life, they present their own set of challenges.
Absolutely. Social media often presents a very curated version of reality.
Right.
So investigators will need to carefully analyze her posts, look for any inconsistencies, any hidden messages, or changes in behavior that might give clues about the true nature of her relationship with Brandon.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's almost like trying to solve a puzzle where you're missing some of the pieces.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach these cases with both empathy and a critical eye, recognizing that the truth may be far more complex than what we initially see on the surface.
So it's this delicate balance, trying to uncover the truth while also respecting the memory of everyone involved and protecting the children.
It is. It's a responsibility that your law enforcement, legal professionals, and even the public.
Yeah.
We all have to approach this with sensitivity and a commitment to seeking justice for everyone involved.
And it reminds us that behind every headline, there are real people with their own stories and struggles.
Yeah. And in this case, Jennifer's story is particularly compelling because she chose to share so much of it publicly.
Right.
Her TikToks, they give us this unique perspective, allowing us to see her not just as a victim, but as a woman, trying to navigate this difficult life transition and build a better future for her children, and even finding moments of joy amidst the chaos.
There's a clip of her studying in a coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
And she's talking about juggling work, school, and parenting. And she even jokes about, relying on caffeine pills to get through the day.
Absolutely. It humanizes her, and reminds us that even when facing adversity, people find ways to persevere. They keep moving forward.
She was pursuing a career in healthcare, and she was sharing videos of herself studying.
Wow.
Expressing, all this excitement about this new chapter in her life.
It's a testament to her resilience and her determination to create a brighter future for herself and for her daughters.
Yeah.
It makes the outcome all the more heartbreaking.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, if anything could have been done to prevent this.
Right.
Were there any warning signs that were missed by people close to her or by authorities?
That's a difficult question to answer definitively. However, this case does highlight the importance of recognizing the signs of potential domestic violence.
Right.
Her shift in tone on TikTok, her expressions of fear, those could be indicators of a deteriorating situation.
So what can we learn from her story?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who might be concerned about a friend or a family member who's maybe exhibiting some of those signs?
First and foremost, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. So don't hesitate to reach out to the person you know.
Yeah.
Let them know you're there for them and encourage them to seek help if needed.
And what if they're reluctant to talk about it or downplay the situation?
It's important to approach these conversations with sensitivity and avoid judgment. Just listening and expressing your concern can make a world of difference. You can also provide them with resources,
Right.
like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which offers confidential support and guidance.
That's a great point. Sometimes just knowing that there's somebody out there that they can talk to can make all the difference.
Exactly.
But what about the legal side of things?
Right.
What options are available to someone who's experiencing domestic violence?
In Mississippi, there are laws in place to protect victims of domestic violence. They can file for a protective order, which would legally prohibit the abuser from contacting them or even coming near them.
Okay. Are there resources to help victims navigate that?
Yes. There are organizations like the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence that provide legal advocacy and support services to victims. They can help victims understand their rights, file for those protective orders, and access other resources like shelters and counseling.
It's reassuring to know that these systems are in place to protect victims and help them, break free from these abusive situations.
Sure.
But what about the perpetrators? Is there anything that can be done to address their behavior and prevent, future violence?
That's a really complex issue. While accountability and legal consequences are crucial, it's also important to address the root causes of domestic violence. Promoting healthy relationships, challenging these societal norms that perpetuate violence,
Right.
and providing counseling and rehabilitation programs for abusers.
It's a multifaceted problem.
Absolutely.
And it requires a comprehensive approach.
Right.
It involves not just law enforcement and the legal system, but also community organizations, mental health professionals, and really society as a whole.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of respect, empathy, and nonviolence where everyone feels safe and supported.
And this brings us back to Jennifer's story and the chilling reality that despite her efforts to create a positive and hopeful future, she ultimately became a victim of violence.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that domestic violence can affect anyone, regardless of, their social media persona or outward appearance.
Absolutely. And it underscores the importance of vigilance, both on an individual level and as a society. We need to be aware of those warning signs, we need to be willing to intervene, and we need to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions.
Her TikToks, while they offer this glimpse into her life and her struggles, they also serve as this reminder of the hidden pain that so many people carry. They challenge us to look beyond the surface and recognize that even seemingly happy and successful individuals might be battling these unseen demons.
You're right. It's a powerful lesson in empathy and a call to action for all of us to be more attentive, more supportive, and more proactive in creating a world where everyone feels safe and valued.
This deep dive into the Sheffield case has been really emotionally heavy,
It has.
but also incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
If we could step back for a moment, what aspects of this case do you find particularly noteworthy from a legal and investigative standpoint?
Well, I think what's really fascinating here is how Jennifer's TikToks have become this unexpected source of evidence,
Right.
offering investigators this unique window into her state of mind and the dynamics of her relationship with Brandon.
Yeah.
It raises some really interesting questions about the use of social media in criminal investigation.
It's a relatively new frontier in forensic science,
It is?
analyzing digital footprints for clues and evidence.
Absolutely. But it also presents these ethical considerations, right? Balancing the need for evidence with the right to privacy is a delicate issue that the courts are still really grappling with. And, in this case, Jennifer's public sharing on TikTok might make the use of her videos more straightforward, but it still requires careful consideration.
And how might Jennifer's online portrayal of Brandon, initially praising him as supportive, how might that impact the investigation and potential legal proceedings?
Well, it adds another layer of complexity. Investigators are going to need to determine if her positive comments were genuine or perhaps a way of masking a darker reality.
Right.
This could involve analyzing the timing of her posts, any changes in tone, and any potential inconsistencies with other evidence.
It's almost like trying to, separate fact from fiction and understand the context behind her online persona.
Exactly. And it highlights the challenges of interpreting digital evidence. What might seem straightforward on the surface could have a completely different meaning when considered within the broader context of the case.
Right. It's a reminder that even in the digital age, human behavior is still complex and often contradictory.
It certainly is. And that's what makes these cases so fascinating, but also so challenging to unravel.
It really makes you think about the stories we tell online.
Yeah.
And the stories that we keep hidden. Jennifer's case is a stark reminder that we never truly know what's happening behind closed doors, even when someone is, sharing their life on social media.
It's a reminder that those curated glimpses into people's lives, whether on TikTok, Instagram, or any other platform, are just that.
Time.
Absolutely.
This is a traumatic experience.
It is.
And they'll need ongoing support to navigate the complex emotions and challenges that might arise.
You're right. There's no quick fix for this kind of trauma.
Yeah.
The impact can be long-lasting, and it's important for them to have access to the resources they need, both in the short term and the long term.
I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The location of the alleged incident. You mentioned that investigators would be looking into the choice of the construction site, but beyond its potential legal significance.
Right.
I wonder if the location itself holds any symbolic meaning.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Construction sites are often associated with building We're creating something new.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of this case, it's almost ironic
Right.
because instead of creating something positive,
Yeah.
this location was allegedly the scene of something destructive.
It makes you think about the contrast between the intended purpose of a construction site, progress, development, growth,
Yeah.
and the alleged actions that took place there.
It's a jarring juxtaposition.
It is.
And it speaks to the broader issue of how seemingly ordinary places can become sites of harm and trauma.
Right.
It reminds us that abuse can happen anywhere, even in places we wouldn't expect.
It's a sobering thought, and it underscores the need for vigilance and awareness in all aspects of our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to pay attention to our surroundings, trust our instincts, and be willing to speak up if something doesn't seem right.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much to unpack in this case.
Absolutely.
Let's continue this deep dive when we come back. So we've been exploring this case from many angles, but I keep coming back to the fact that we're dealing with a serious accusation involving a person in a position of authority.
Right.
What are the implications of that for the legal proceedings?
Well, the fact that Massey is a teacher definitely adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
The law recognizes the unique power dynamics inherent in the teacher-student relationship, and prosecutors often take a particularly hard line in these kinds of cases.
Right.
They want to send a strong message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
So would that influence how the prosecution approaches plea negotiations or their willingness to go to trial?
Absolutely. Prosecutors often feel a greater sense of responsibility to protect students and ensure the safety of school environments.
Right.
They might be less inclined to offer a lenient plea deal to someone in a position of authority, like a teacher, even if the evidence is somewhat ambiguous.
And juries might be more inclined to believe the accusations against a teacher as well.
That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
There's a societal expectation that teachers should be role models and protectors of their students.
Right.
When those expectations are violated, it can trigger strong emotional responses and potentially bias jurors against the accused.
It seems like the stakes are incredibly high, not just for Massey, but for the entire school community.
Absolutely.
This case must be raising so many questions and concerns among parents and educators alike.
It's a wake-up call for everyone.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that abuse can happen anywhere,
Right.
even in places we consider safe and trustworthy.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for increased awareness, vigilance, and proactive measures to prevent these situations from occurring in the first place.
So what can schools do to create a safer environment for students and prevent future abuse?
It's a multifaceted issue,
Yeah.
but there are several key steps schools can take. First, they need to foster a culture of open communication,
Right.
where students feel comfortable reporting any concerns they have, whether it's about their own experiences or something they've witnessed.
Okay.
This requires establishing clear reporting procedures, training staff to recognize potential warning signs,
Right.
and ensuring that students know their rights and have access to confidential resources and support.
It sounds like it's about creating a climate where students feel empowered to speak up and know they'll be taken seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about building trust and dismantling the fear of retaliation that often prevents victims from coming forward.
Right. Absolutely.
Schools also need to be proactive in educating students about healthy relationships, consent, and boundaries. This kind of education shouldn't be a one-time thing.
Right.
It needs to be integrated into the curriculum at all grade levels.
And it's not just about educating students, right? Teachers and staff also need training and resources to help them understand their responsibilities, recognize potential signs of abuse.
Absolutely. And respond appropriately.
Professional development programs that focus on these issues are critical.
Yeah.
Teachers need to be equipped with the tools and knowledge to create safe and supportive learning environments for all students.
It seems like the conversation around teacher-student relationships is shifting, and this case is part of that larger societal reckoning.
I agree.
Yeah.
We're becoming more aware of the power imbalances that exist in these relationships.
Right.
And we're starting to challenge the notion that all interactions between teachers and students are inherently benign.
Yeah.
We're recognizing the potential for manipulation and abuse.
Right.
And we're demanding greater accountability from those in positions of authority.
And hopefully this increased awareness will lead to more preventative measures and a decrease in these types of cases.
I hope so.
But this case also raises important questions about consent and legal adulthood. We've touched on the fact that even if the student in this case was 18, the power dynamics can still make consent questionable.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
It's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
Legally, 18 is the age of consent in most states, meaning that an adult can engage in sexual activity with another adult without it being considered a crime.
Right.
However, when it comes to teacher-student relationships,
Yeah.
the law recognizes that the power dynamic can make consent much more complicated.
Right.
Teachers hold a position of authority over their students,
Mm-hmm.
and that authority can easily be used to manipulate or coerce a student into a sexual relationship,
Right.
even if they are legally an adult.
So it's not just about age, it's about the context and the potential for abuse of power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if a student feels like they are consenting, it's important to consider whether that consent is truly free and informed,
Right.
or whether it's been influenced by the teacher's position of power.
Right.
There's a legal concept called taking advantage of their position,
Okay.
which recognizes this very issue. It essentially means that a teacher can be found guilty of an improper relationship, even if the student is of legal age,
Right.
if the relationship was based on an abuse of their position of authority.
This case really forces us to confront some deeply ingrained societal norms about power and authority, especially in the context of education.
Yeah, it challenges us to reevaluate our assumptions and think critically about the dynamics that exist within these relationships.
Right.
It's about recognizing that power can be easily abused
Yeah.
and that we need to be vigilant in protecting those who are most vulnerable.
And part of that vigilance is understanding the signs of grooming and manipulation.
Right.
What are some red flags that students, parents, and educators should be aware of?
Well, there are several behavioral patterns that can indicate potential grooming.
Okay.
For example, a teacher who consistently singles out a particular student for special attention, gifts, or favors
Okay.
might be engaging in grooming behavior.
Right.
Similarly, a teacher who creates situations where they are alone with a student outside of normal school activities
Okay.
might be trying to isolate the student and make them more vulnerable to manipulation.
Right.
Another red flag is a teacher who communicates with a student excessively outside of school hours, especially through personal channels like text messages or social media.
So it's about being aware of any behavior that crosses professional boundaries or seems inappropriate given the context of the teacher-student relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's also important to trust your instincts.
Right.
If something feels wrong or uncomfortable,
Yeah,
it's worth investigating further.
absolutely.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek advice from trusted adults,
Mm-hmm.
or report your concerns to the appropriate authorities.
This case has been a real eye-opener in terms of understanding the complexities of teacher-student relationships and the potential for abuse.
It has.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with some key takeaways.
Okay.
I think it's crucial to remember that abuse can happen anywhere.
Right. And it's often perpetrated by someone the victim knows and trusts. We need to be vigilant, educate ourselves about the signs of grooming and manipulation,
Absolutely.
and foster a culture of open communication where victims feel empowered to speak up.
I agree.
And for those who have experienced abuse, it's important to remember that it's not your fault,
Right.
and there are resources available to support you. You are not alone.
You are not alone.
This case might be about a specific incident, but it has far-reaching implications. It compels us to examine our own biases, question power structures,
Absolutely.
and advocate for policies and practices that prioritize the safety and well-being of all students.
I think that's a great point.
This deep dive has certainly been a journey filled with unsettling facts and thought-provoking discussions.
It has.
It's clear that this case, while still unfolding, has already sparked crucial conversations about consent, power, and accountability in educational settings.
And as we move forward, we must continue to prioritize the safety and well-being of all students, ensuring that schools are truly the nurturing and supportive environments they are meant to be. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.